And Minas Morgul answered. There was a flare of livid lightnings, forks of blue flame springing up from the tower and from the encircling hills into the sullen clouds. The earth groaned, and out of the city there came a cry. Out of the gate an army came, all clad in sable, dark as the night. So great an army had never issued from that vale since the days of Isildur's might, and yet it was but one, and not the greatest of hosts, that Mordor now sent forth. Middle-earth's fate is to be decided. The Siege of Gondor is about to begin. It's the 3019th year of the Third Age. The War of the Ring began a year prior, and the situation is tense in East Gondor. The Gondorian steward Denethor has long expected a grand assault from Mordor. The Dark Lord Sauron have summoned his allies, large contingents of Islings, Southrons and Varyags. He has long prepared a great army ready to assault Middle-earth. The Kingdom of Gondor has existed for over 3,000 years, but are severely weakened after repeated attacks from its enemies, a civil war, a great plague, and the loss of their king. After the last king of Gondor, Eärnur, disappeared after accepting the Witch King's challenge in 2050, Gondor had stewards ruling in the absence of the king. By the time Sauron returned to Mordor in 2942, Gondor's population had declined and their influence shrunk. Denethor had before his stewardship foreseen that a great assault from the east would come during his reign as steward, and he wisely prepared Gondor for this upcoming struggle. Meanwhile, Aragorn have taken part in the Battle of the Hornburg, where the Rohirrim successfully defeated the forces of Isengard. The Rohirrim now prepare to aid Gondor in its dire need, and they are mustering their forces. Aragorn is through lineage related to King Isildur, the man who used the shards of Narsil to cut the one ring of Sauron's finger. As the Rohirrim prepare for war, Aragorn uses the Palantir of Orthanc to reveal himself to Sauron. Aragorn shows the reforged sword Anduril, but most importantly, Sauron is led to believe that Aragorn is now in possession of the One Ring due to past events. Sauron fears what Aragorn can do with the One Ring and a large host at his disposal, and he therefore commands the Witch King to march upon Minas Tirith and destroy the Gondorian forces before Aragorn reached the city. The Witch King advanced from Minas Morgul the 10th of March, while another army marched out from the Black Gate simultaneously. Sauron's plan was to attack the Isle of Carandros with the northern army, while the Witch King's army conquered western Osgiliath. The armies would then enter the Ramas Ekor at different angles, surround the city, and start a siege. The road to the north would be covered with trenches and stakes, to prevent the Rohirrim from charging into the flank. Gondor, on the other hand, could do little but wait. They were heavily outnumbered and held a weak garrison at both Carandros and West Osgiliath, but they had superior positioning. The Witch King's forces arrived. In secret, he had prepared floats and barges in East Osgiliath, and he now unleashed his force. Faramir, captain of the White Tower, and his Ithilien rangers let loose their arrows. The orcs swarmed the Anduin and were perfect targets for the skilled rangers. Meanwhile, the floats were put upon the Anduin, and hundreds of orcs worked like bees. The archers continued to cause great damage upon the Morgul host, but the orcs had now set foot on West Osgiliath. Bloody fighting emerged in the streets. Even though the Gondorian forces lacked numbers, their combat skill outmatched the orcs. But the forces of Sauron now unleashed their most dreaded weapon, the Black Captain himself. Few men would stand and abide even the rumor of his coming. The situation soon got worse for Faramir, and he decided to retreat to the Causeway Forts. Fugitives from Carandros arrive at Minas Tirith. The isle has fallen. The Witch King now breached the Ramas Ekor, as well as conquering the Causeway Forts. The Gondorians now risked their rout, but Faramir acted as a rearguard with a company of brave men. Not long did it take before the force of Mordor and Harad swarmed Anorin and clashed into Faramir's retreat. The Nazgûl came stooping down on their fell beasts, causing men to throw their weapons on the ground and quailing in fear. Retreat became rout, and Faramir's men fought a losing battle against Southron cavalry and fell beasts. Denethor now unleashed his sortie. All the cavalry left in Minas Tirith now charged out, led by Gandalf and Prince Imrail. The Swan Knights of the Lamerth charged with the Númenórean glory, and the Morgul host were utterly crushed. The Nazgûl were outmatched by Gandalf and retreated, for the Witch King had not yet entered the scene. Even though the sally had been successful, more troops now entered Anorion from north, east and southeast. The sortie was called in, and the viewers applauded the knights for their courage and skill. However, the defense of the Pelennor had not been without losses. The Gondorian forces from Osgiliath had lost a third of their force, and the brave Captain Faramir had himself been struck by a poisonous Southron arrow. It was a desperate situation for the force of Gondor, whom could only hope for the arrival of the Rohirrim. So far, the plans of the Black Captain had been successful, and the siege of Minas Tirith now commenced. At the same time as Faramir had held the enemy outside of the Pelennor, great battle had ensued in South Gondor, where a giant corsair fleet had landed. At Linhir, battle was intense and tight, but when Aragorn and Lesar arrived with the Oathbreakers, all men upon either side fled, except for Angbor, the commander of the Gondorian forces. Angbor rallied his forces and later followed Aragorn, and Aragorn now pursued the corsair force day and night until they reached Pelargir. The main force of corsairs was positioned here in their 50 ships. And then came the Shadow Host. Their coming was like a great tide sweeping all away before it. The corsairs lost their minds and drowned in the Anduin. Aragorn freed the Oathbreakers as they had fulfilled their oath, and his force now set sail towards Harlon, using the acquired corsair ships. Simultaneously in the north, the Rohirrim rode on their way to the rescue of Gondor. Time was against them, and they rode with all their speed. The Rohirrim was worried to not reach Minas Tirith in time, for the road was occupied by an orc force 3 miles west of the beacon Amundine, and the road was filled with trenches and stakes. The Rohirrim would be severely slowed down if they committed this route. While planning the next move, King Theoden of Rohan had been approached by a mysterious being, the Druidine leader Ghân-buri-Ghân. Ghân told of a secret way that avoided the road. Thus, the Rohirrim were able to approach the Ramas Ekor from west, hidden under the trees in the Stone Wain Valley. This allowed the Rohirrim to reach Gondor through the north breach of Ramas Ekor, which the orcs had foolishly destroyed. Meanwhile, Minas Tirith had been bombarded by fiery projectiles, and great fires rose in the city. Eventually, the casting engines halted, and the great ram Grond were brought in front of the city gate. Gandalf and the hardiest men of Gondor were now stationed at the gate, prepared for the incoming assault. The Witch King approached the gate. And in rode the Lord of the Nazgûl. Only one could endure his malice, Gandalf. But in the eve of the moment, the horns of the north were heard in the mountainsides of Mount Mindolluin. The Rohirrim had come to the rescue of Gondor. There was no time for hesitation. The moment of surprise caught the Morgul host, and the Rohirric force attacked in 3 lanes. Orcs positioned north of the city were crushed by the Rohirrim. King Theoden kept charging towards the city and soon clashed with the Haradrim cavalry force. Even though Theoden's force was heavily outnumbered, their skill and fury in this moment were unmatched, and Theoden himself slew the Black Serpent. The Haradrim cavalry fled eastward, and the Rohirrim gathered around their glorious king. But in this very moment, Snowmane, the horse of the king, was pierced by a black arrow, and the horse broke the king. A fell beast approached, and all men fled for the coming of the Black Captain. Only one stood by the king in this moment, Éowyn Shieldmaiden. The Witch King grew doubtful of this strange, valiant opponent, but hate conquered him. He underestimated the situation and was stabbed by Meradok the Hobbit, and finally completely broken by Éowyn. A shrill cry faded to the wind, and the prophecy of Glorfindel was thus fulfilled. From the causeway forts, the legions of Morgul now rushed forth, and from southfront horsemen, footmen, along with the giant Mumakil approached. All the forces left in Minas Tirith now sallied out. All the Gondorian knights along with Imrahil's company rode east to aid Éowyn. The Rohirrim had defeated the southfront cavalry and footmen, but the Mumakil now caused problems. Easterlings, Variags and half-trolls now engaged the Gondorian troops, preventing them from combining forces with Éowyn. The battle is tied, but it soon becomes evident that doom is at hand when the Corsair fleet is seen at Harlond. Éowyn prepares for a glorious last stand, creating a large shield wall. The bells of Minas Tirith sounds the retreat, but the ringing is overshadowed by the wind. With the wind comes Aragorn, heir to the throne of Gondor. The Morgul host is now trapped between Aragorn and Éowyn, and the battle is decided. The force of the west rallies, and the remaining forces of Morgul drowns in the Anduin. Sauron shook in his tower. He had lost his most powerful servant, and the blade that was broken had defeated him. Few orcs or men would ever return to their homelands, and to the land of the Haradrim came only a tale far off, a rumour of the wrath and terror of Gondor. The outcome of the battle further resulted in the assault of the Black Gate, which would ultimately decide the fate of Middle-earth forever. Thank you for watching this video. This was my first animated project, and it required 2 months of full work. Please consider supporting me on Patreon to show your support. Remember to subscribe to explore Middle-earth and check out these videos right now.